Beto O'Rourke is dropping out of the Democratic presidential contest. He also says he's not going to run for any other political office including his home state of Texas in 2020, despite persistent efforts by party leaders and political donors to coax him into another bid for the Senate. Beto will not be a candidate for U.S. Senate in Texas in 2020, said Rob Friedlander, an aide to Beto O'Rourke. His campaign has been under extreme financial strain, and Mr. O'Rourke's advisers concluded that proceeding in the race might have meant making deep cuts to his staff in order to pay for advertising and other measures to compete in the early primary and caucus state. Mr. O'Rourke called for federal gun control policies that would require owners of assault-style weapons to surrender them to the government. That's a far more aggressive stance than most Democratic presidential candidates have endorsed. In an August interview following the El Paso massacre, Mr. O'Rourke said his focus would be taking the fight to Donald Trump and being with those who have been denigrated and demeaned. Senator Chuck Schumer, who was an architect of gun control legislation in the 1990s, said he saw no support in the party for Mr. O'Rourke's stance on requiring gun owners to surrender certain firearms. In the earliest days of his campaign, Mr. O'Rourke was a fundraising powerhouse, collecting more than $6 million in his first day as a candidate. But his fundraising cratered almost immediately. He raised more in his first 48 hours than in the following 100 days, and steadily depleted his campaign treasury by spending more than he was taking in. It is unclear whether Mr. O'Rourke's exit will have a significant impact on the larger shape of the Democratic primary race. In a New York Times/Siena College poll released on Friday, Mr. O'Rourke was supported by just 1% of likely Democratic caucusgoers in Iowa. He had not yet met the thresholds for participating in the upcoming primary debates in November and December. Mr. O'Rourke may find, as other former candidates have done, that the goodwill of his fellow Democrats returns quickly once he is no longer a competitor for the nomination. He is 47 years old, leaving him plenty of time to consider a return to electoral politics. But in a recent interview with Politico, Mr. O'Rourke said that if he did not prevail in the 2020 presidential primary he would not become a candidate again. Concerning this, President Trump said the following in a rally. "Oh. Did you hear? Beto. Did you hear? Beto. Ah. That poor bastard. Well. Poor pathetic guy. He was pathetic. Remember the arms flailing? Remember that, you know. He ran against Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz won. He spent almost $100 million. And Ted Cruz. And I helped Ted. And we campaigned together. And it was good. But I used to watch him, then when he came onto the really big stage, his crazy stage, I noticed he was flailing with the arms, and he was standing on tables, he was standing on countertops. I said, does he ever stand on the floor and speak? But he's waving his arms and going crazy, and I said, what the hell is he doing? What is he on? But Beto was nasty, and he said that he was born for it, like he was born from heaven. He came down, and if that's the case, some really bad things happen, because he made a total fool out of himself, and he came out of Texas, the great state of Texas. He came out of Texas, a very hot political property, and he went back as cold as you can be. I cannot fathom a scenario where I would run for public office again if I'm not the nominee, Mr. O'Rourke said last month. On TheMedium.com, Beto O'Rourke wrote, our campaign has been about seeing clearly, speaking honestly and acting decisively in the best interests of America. Though it is difficult to accept, it is clear to me now that this campaign does not have the means to move forward successfully. My service to the country will not be as a candidate or as the nominee. Acknowledging this now is in the best interests of those in the campaign. It is in the best interests of this party as we seek to unify around a nominee. And it is in the best interests of the country. I decided to run for president because I believe that I could help bring a divided country together in common cause to confront the greatest set of challenges we've ever faced. I also knew that the most fundamental of them is fear, the fear that Donald Trump wants us to feel about one another. The very real fear that too many in this country live under. And the fear we sometimes feel when it comes to doing the right thing, especially when it runs counter to what is politically convenient or popular. I knew, and I still know, that we can reject and overcome these fears and choose to instead be defined by our ambitions and our ability to achieve them. I knew that we would have to be unafraid in how we ran the campaign. We'd have to run with nothing to lose. And I knew that our success would depend not on PACs or corporations but upon the grassroots volunteers and supporters from everywhere, especially from those places that had been overlooked or taken for granted. We should be proud of what we fought for and what we were able to achieve. Together, we were able to help change what is possible when it comes to the policies that we care about and the country we want to serve. We released the first comprehensive plan to confront climate change of any of the presidential candidates. We took the boldest approach to gun safety in American history. We confronted institutional, systemic racism and called out Donald Trump for his white supremacy and the violence that he's encouraged against communities that don't look like, pray like or love like the majority in this country. And we were one of the first to reject all PAC money, corporate contributions, special interest donations and lobbyist help. We released the most ambitious voter registration and voting rights plan, one that would bring 55 million new voters into our democracy, and remove barriers for those who've been silenced because of their race, ethnicity or the fact that they live with a disability. We spoke with pride about El Paso and communities of immigrants. We elevated the plight and the promise of refugees and asylum seekers. And we proposed nothing short of rewriting this country's immigration laws in our own image, to forever free from fear more than 11 million of our fellow Americans who should be able to contribute even more to our shared success. And at this moment of truth for our country, we laid bare the cost and consequence of Donald Trump, the rise in hate crimes, the terror attack in El Paso, the perversion of the Constitution, the diminished standing of the United States around the world. But we also made clear the common responsibility to confront him, to hold him accountable and ensure that he does not serve another term in office. Committing ourselves to this task not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans first before we are anything else. I am grateful to each one of you, and to all the people who made up the heart and soul of this campaign. You are among the hundreds of thousands of our fellow Americans who made a donation, signed up to volunteer or spread the word about this campaign and our opportunity to help decide the election of our lifetime. You have been with me from the beginning, through it all. I know that you did it not for me personally, not for the Democratic Party, but for our country at this defining moment. Though today we are suspending this campaign, let us each continue our commitment to the country in whatever capacity we can. Let us continue to fearlessly champion the issues and causes that brought us together. Whether it is ending the epidemic of gun violence or dismantling structural racism or successfully confronting climate change before it is too late, we will continue to organize and mobilize and act in the best interests of America. We will work to ensure that the Democratic nominee is successful in defeating Donald Trump in 2020. I can tell you firsthand from having the chance to know the candidates, we will be well served by any one of them, and I'm going to be proud to support whoever that nominee is. I'm proud to call them president in January 2021, because they will win. We must support them in the race against Donald Trump and support them in their administration afterwards, do all that we can to help them heal a wounded country and bring us together in meeting the greatest set of challenges we have ever known. I'm confident I will see you down the road, and I look forward to that day. Thank you for making this campaign possible, and for continuing to believe that we can turn this moment of great peril into a moment of great promise for America and the world. With you always, and forever grateful. Beto. In a speech Beto gave announcing that he will no longer be running for President of the United States in 2020, Beto said, "This is a campaign that has prided itself on seeing things clearly and on speaking honestly, and on acting decisively. We have to clearly see at this point that we do not have the means to pursue this campaign successfully, and that my service would not be as a candidate, nor as a nominee of this party for the presidency. I entered this campaign, because I believe that we had the ability to bring together a very divided, a highly polarized country, in the face of the greatest set of challenges that we have ever known. And the chief among those challenges is the fear that grips so much of America today. The fear that our current president wants us to feel about one another, about ourselves as a country. the very real fear that far too many live under, day in and day out. And the fear in public life too often to do the right thing, because it may go against the political wisdom or the polls or the politics or the prospects in the next election. But here's what we've all done, what we all decided to do. We chose in the face of that to be unafraid. To say what needed to be said. To call things by their right name, and to go everywhere. Especially those places that have been counted out or forgotten or taken for granted. To bring everyone into the solutions to these challenges and our democracy as it faces the test of all tests. You were the first presidential campaign to propose an ambitious plan to confront climate change before it is too late. You're the first campaign to propose the boldest set of solutions to the epidemic of gun violence in this country, unafraid to confront the conventional wisdom or what was possible to say in the public sphere for so many years and decades before all of us. You made this possible and made the change in our country and the change that especially our kids deserve possible. We talked about and we elevated the plight and the promise of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees in the communities in which they live, including Des Moines, Iowa, and in El Paso, Texas. Nothing to be afraid of. Everything to celebrate. An example for the rest of this country about who we are at our best. We also together connected the dots to help this country come to the conclusion about the costs and the consequences of Donald Trump. The racism foundational endemic systemic in America brought out in the open during this administration and directed along with the violence that is unknown in any other country on this planet. Here where we lose 40,000 of our fellow Americans every single year to gun violence, he directed that at the most vulnerable and the most defenseless on August 3rd of this year 22 killed in El Paso, Texas. We helped this country to understand that did not happen by accident, but instead, by design. And each one of us knowing that going forward will be culpable in this violence and in this racism unless each of us stand up to be counted, stand up against this president, stand up for the best interests of this country, and have the political courage to do what is necessary while there is still time to act. Every single one of you should be proud of your ability to do that, to change the conversation in this country, to bring the wisdom, the genius, the intelligence of all of our fellow Americans, regardless of what party they belong to, where they live, who they love, to whom they pray, how many generations they've been in this country, or whether they just showed up today. If you're here right now, you're in the right place. If you're in America, you're in the right country. You'll be part of our success, and every single one of us here, and all of you are part of this campaign made this happen. Though this is the end of this campaign, we are right in the middle of this fight. I will do everything that I can to support the eventual nominee of this party with everything that I've got, and I encourage every single one of you to do the same. I will still be part of all the causes that brought us here together in the first place, whether it is ending gun violence or confronting climate change before it is too late or addressing the structural racism in America or making sure this economy works for every single one of us. I will still be part of the fight, and so will you, because I know that you are not here, and I know that you are not part of this campaign for me, or for this party, but for this country, that we love so much. For this country which we are going to come through for now at its defining moments of truth, and I will tell you this. The very last place that I got to visit before being here in Des Moines as a candidate, just as an American, as a human being, this Newtown, Connecticut, and I listened to a community, and to families, who had been through so much, and today, almost 7 years later, show so much courage, and give us an example for the way forward, not just when it comes to safety in our schools, or against the gun violence that we see too often in this country, but how we as Americans can make it, and so many of the best ideas, and so much of the courage in that room came from the very youngest among us, including those who are too young to vote. And that is how it has always been in this country. At these defining moments of truth, it is the very youngest. In World War II, the 17 and 18 and 19-year-olds landing at Normandy on the 6th of June 1944 to make this country and this world safe for democracy. On the 1st of February 1964, students from North Carolina A&T sitting down at the lunch counter at that Woolworths in Greensboro, North Carolina, and having the audacity and the courage to order a cup of coffee, and after they were denied, because of the color of their skin, showing up every day thereafter until they finally integrated that lunch counter, helped to shock the conscience of this country, inspired other young people around America, and produced the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Those young students at Kent State in 1970 who knew that we should not be at war in Vietnam, and stood up against that and stood in the line of fire, 4 of them giving their lives. It has always been the young people of this country willing to serve, to struggle, to sacrifice, who have brought us to our senses, and brought us to a better place than we would have been otherwise. Let us allow ourselves to be inspired and led by them right now at this moment. Let us ensure that each one of us does all that we can to make sure that we are worthy of them, and the generations that follow. That is why we're in this fight. That's why I will stay in this fight in whatever capacity I can. And why I am so grateful that I was in this fight as a candidate with you. I want to tell you from the very bottom of my heart how grateful I am, how well served I was, by the members of this team. Those who are on the campaign staff, those who never drew a paycheck, and at their own expense traveled this country, brought other people in the lead in this campaign, and in this country, and made sure through the courage of their convictions, and their willingness to act on them, this country can realize its potential, and its promise. This has been the honor of my lifetime. I love you all, and I know that I'll be seeing you down the road. Thank you so much. This is the end of Beto's speech.